for the hardest-hitting show in talk radio. The true progressive voice since 2012. This is Southpaws.
And welcome to Southpaws on the Pacifica Radio Network. We are the leaders of the revolution. I'm Darren Gibson.
I'm Jack Prince.
And we've got a packed show for you today. We got to talk about the railroad workers and a potential strike apparently now might be averted by Congress. And we'll give you some details about that. We got to talk about Trump's dinner. Guess who's coming to dinner?
Yeah.
Wasn't there a movie by that name?
There sure was.
Sidney Poitier, I believe, was in that. Oh, my gosh. Oh, gosh. And then we also have to talk about some more stuff about the Club Q shooting and right-wing violence, actually. Just to cut right to the chase on this one, no pun intended, for our local listeners. We also have to mention Stewart Rhodes. We talked about him on last week's show, the founder of the Oath Keepers. He's been found guilty, so we'll discuss all that and more on this episode. Before we get started, a couple of reminders that you can follow us on social media by going to facebook.com/Southpaws Radio Show. You can follow us on Twitter at Southpaws Radio. You can follow us on Tumblr at southpawsradioshow.tumblr.com. You can follow us on YouTube by doing a search for Southpaws Radio, and you can become a patron of the show by going to patreon.com/Southpaws Radio. You can listen to the show anytime at Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Podcast Addict, Podvine, and Pandora by doing a search for Southpaws. Once you found our logo, you found us. We send links to our weekly episodes to our Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, and YouTube accounts. You can listen to us on Global Community Radio Channel 1 every Saturday night at 11 Eastern, and you can listen to us on great Pacifica stations including KCEI in Taos, New Mexico, KZGM in Kabul, Missouri, and KEPJ in San Antonio, Texas. So be sure to listen to us on your local Pacifica station.
Well, I can't wait to get in. I don't know what area you want to start, if it was the Oath Keeper conviction, but I saw an interview this morning where they talked to his wife, his ex-wife, and it's reminiscent of Trump, where she said, you know, he's always gotten away with it. His entire life, he used the tactics of bullying and threats and got away with it. And hallelujah, Darren, right now, he hasn't gotten away with it.
His estranged wife, let's add that.
Yeah,
they're not together right now.
Smart woman.
Yeah, we might as well just go ahead and mention, we'll start out with Stewart Rhodes. Yeah, we mentioned it on last week's show, the trial for Stewart Rhodes, the founder of the Oath Keepers, and I believe 6 other people had taken place. When we had last week's show, the jury had been released to render a verdict. Mm-hmm. And it took them a few days, and they did indeed come back with a verdict of guilty on seditious conspiracy charges.
Yeah, that's heavy duty. That's 20 years.
Yeah, he could get 20 years on that charge, and I forget what other charges he was convicted of. I'll repeat what I said on last week's show, and I know I probably pissed off a few people. I just don't care. I'm just going to go with what I've been saying all along. If it was me prosecuting, I'd go for treason charges, and I'd be going for the death penalty. I'd make sure the Stewart Rhodes was sitting in a cell in Terre Haute, Indiana, right next to Marvin Gabriel.
Yeah, I don't think that the family of the now passed away guard or the man that was squashed in the rotating door, I don't think they'd find that extreme at all, Darren.
No. All the other Capitol police officers who have taken their own life since January 6th.
Yeah.
You know, that's PTSD. And it's... I
say nothing of Uncle Sam, who had a noose around his neck that day. I'm not talking about Pence. I'm talking about democracy. You know, how many deaths are related to that? You can't really ignore the extrapolation of violence. I don't care if it's 8 basketball or football players jumping a player and beating him with a helmet, who also were found guilty this week, or if it's the shooting we just went through, another nightclub shooting, and you turn around and there'll be one waiting for us. All of that, there's a string attached to the leader of this country who justified violence as a way to accomplish his objectives.
Absolutely. And you just mentioned the Michigan State players. Let's dig into that a little bit, because we have been talking about that over the last couple of episodes.
Sure.
So the Big Ten comes out and issued punishment for 7 of the students. Do you remember what it was? Because I didn't really pay attention.
The penalty itself?
Yeah.
Whether it were charges I can't.
I'm just talking about what the Big Ten did.
The Big Ten just issued a slap on the wrist. It was a $100,000 fine to the university, which is about an hour's worth of hot coffee being sold on game day. Yeah. And the truth really is that the commissioner of the Big Ten, who has a son who plays on the team, is suspected of pulling his punches. Mm-hmm. He came out and announced that he wanted to wait until the criminal prosecution from Ingham County was completed, and his then action would stem from whatever that was. But people see no correlation between a rather stringent penalty legally and the Big Ten penalty, which, again, is a mere hand slap. The bottom result is that in the green and white land down there, they've got this mantra that the attack was justified because theoretically this player from Michigan was saying something. I don't know in the heavenly book of etiquette what you have to say that merits getting beaten in the head with a helmet, but in the green and white mind, it was justified because he supposedly said something that merited him being beaten. I'm absolutely, completely disgusted. I love the game, and I love and watch Michigan State. This, I feel, was really not accurately penalized. There's been no admission. Instead, you've got Izzo coming out claiming that Michigan State shouldn't have been the only school fined or penalized. It's the same kind of blind vision that I see with Trumpers. It resembles the same kind of reduced rationale.
Yeah, now those players are still facing criminal charges in Washtenaw County for assault. I believe felonious assault, correct?
Yeah, 2 more severe than the others. And now Michigan State has reinstated 6 of the 8. If you can imagine that. So they're ready to play, although I doubt that they're going to make a bowl game. But if they do, they're back on the team with, again, just a mild repercussion to a assault and battery.
Yeah.
See, assault, I can assault somebody verbally in a crowd, and that's punishable. But assault and battery means I attack you physically.
Yeah.
I attack you and hit you, or I hit you with a weapon, or even in this case, you just all taking punches at him. That's a vicious assault. And there has not been a commensurate response, in my opinion.
Yeah. Now, there still is a possibility the NCAA could issue their own sanctions, correct?
That is a possibility, and I have a suspicion, hope I should say, that it'd be a heck of a lot more severe than what we've seen Michigan State own up to.
Yeah. We will definitely keep everybody apprised of the events in Washtenaw County, Michigan. So, and by the way, I know, Jack, you watched on Saturday Michigan beat Ohio State. I was kind of biting my fingernails a little bit at the beginning because the quarterback hadn't quite lit up yet. But, man, once the pilot light lit, he started dropping bombs down the field. I couldn't believe it.
Yes, he certainly did. And, here's another chance for a university to be intellectually honest. Why couldn't Coach Day come out the next day and say, you know what, we got our butts beat. The second half yesterday especially. We couldn't do this. We couldn't do that. Michigan had big plays, one after another. They're a fine school. We were honored to be on the same field with them. We wish them luck. Instead, there's always some backbiting, some animosity, supposedly not supposedly, a lot of bad blood between him and Harbaugh, and a lot of flat-out whining. I was an ex-coach, and sometimes being absolutely honest is the best way to get out of a tough situation, and I think Ohio State missed it.
Yep, and Michigan won the Big Ten East. They now face Purdue, I believe, for the Big Ten championship. That's going to be Saturday in Indianapolis. So
yes.
Go Blue.
Go Blue. Keep going Blue.
Yeah. Well, let's keep going with our stories for today. We might as well talk about this railroad strike, at least the potential. It now looks less and less like it's likely. Let's get into this a little bit. This is a story by Michael Sainato from The Guardian. This is from Wednesday, November 30th. Railroad workers have expressed dismay at Joe Biden's proposed solution to a looming strike that threatens to derail the U.S. economy, which they say belies his image as the most pro-union president in generations. That's Biden's own words.
Mm-hmm.
So what did Biden do? Called on Congress to intervene to block the strike. Unbelievable.
Unbelievable. Exactly.
Yep.
That's far right. That's farther right than the conservatives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll get into this a little bit here. The impending strike comes as the U.S. struggles with a cost of living crisis driven by a 40-year high in inflation. And Biden said that a railroad labor action could, quote, devastate our economy, end of quote. Let me stop there. The reason we have high inflation is because of record profits in just about every industry.
Including the
oil, railroads. Exactly. Yep. Yeah. And Bernie's talked about that. We'll get to some of Bernie's quotes here. So, yeah, and it's not inflation, it's greed. It is pure end-stage capitalist greed, folks.
Unbridled greed.
Yep. Wednesday, Congress is expected to pass legislation that will force a settlement. As a matter of fact, we have an update to that. They did have the vote. We'll actually get to that in just a little bit. But union leaders are unhappy. The Biden solution appears to be the imposition of a settlement reached in September that has already been rejected by many for failing to address members' concerns about pay, sick days, staff shortages, and time off. Hugh Sawyer, treasurer of Railroad Workers United, a group representing workers from a variety of rail unions and carriers, said, quote, Joe Biden blew it. He had the opportunity to prove his labor-friendly pedigree to millions of workers by simply asking Congress for legislation to end the threat of a national strike on terms more favorable to workers. Sadly, he could not bring himself to advocate for a lousy handful of sick days. The Democrats and Republicans are both pawns of big business and the corporations. End of quote. And we'll get to that in just a little bit. Matt Parker, a locomotive engineer and chairman of the Nevada State Legislative Board of the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers and Trainmen, said, quote, the overly simplistic approach that the administration has taken to this whole issue shows how out of touch they are with the plight of railroad workers, end of quote. Railroad workers have threatened industrial action over their lack of paid sick time and the rail company's disciplinary attendance systems in which they are penalized for taking unpaid time off, an issue workers say has contributed to a lack of a work-life balance on the job. There was some railroad worker, I saw the meme on Facebook. He works 311 days. He basically works 14 hours a day. Yeah. 311 days a year. And he doesn't have any sick time, paid sick time.
I don't think they have breaks.
Probably not. It's like working conditions working for Amazon, but much worse because it's so physical. 4 of the 12 railroad unions representing a majority of the railroad workforce have rejected a tentative new contract agreement which fails to address their concerns. If any of the 12 unions go on strike, each union has agreed to honor the picket line.
Yeah.
Under the Railway Labor Act, workers' right to legally strike is limited in transportation services. The last railroad strike in the United States occurred in 1992 for 2 days before Congress intervened. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi said Congress would take up legislation Wednesday to stop a nationwide strike that would honor the original labor agreement brokered by the Biden administration in September to avoid industrial action ahead of the midterm elections. She said that the agreement, quote, is not everything I would like to see. I would like to see paid sick leave. Every leading democratic country in the world has it. I don't like going against the ability of a union to strike, but weighing the equities, we must avoid a strike. End of quote. No, this is both parties sucking up to rich people. That's all that it is.
Yep, and rank and file Democrats lining right behind it.
Yep. Parker expressed dismay and disappointment over the Biden administration's push to impose a tentative agreement most railroad workers voted against and warned the impacts of doing so without addressing the quality of life issues will probably lead to higher attrition rates in a workforce that has already experienced significant declines in employment in recent years. As railroad carriers have implemented cuts and more grueling scheduling systems, they have also reported record profits and have paid out $196 billion in stock buybacks and dividends to shareholders since 2010.
Yep.
BNSF, which is the Burlington Northern and Santa Fe, and Union Pacific, the two largest railroad corporations in North America, both reported record profits in 2021. BNSF is owned by billionaire investor Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway conglomerate. So, Bernie Sanders, you know, Bernie, that independent from Vermont, the guy that should have been the president, but the Democratic
guy that
Party
continues to show us some legislation that would be fair and democratic. Without him, there'd be nobody on the Democratic horizon.
Here's what Sanders tweeted about Warren Buffett last week. Quote, Warren Buffett, the owner of BNSF Railway's parent company, became $1.38 billion richer yesterday. End of quote. Thus referring to a boost to Buffett's net worth from a rise in Berkshire Hathaway's stock price. Sanders continued, quote, in one day, Mr. Buffett made twice as much money as it would cost to guarantee 15 paid sick days a year to every rail worker in America. The greed of the rail industry must end. End of quote.
Yeah, you know, this is, to me, a prime example, Darren, of the historical ignorance that's rampant in our country. The historical ignorance that they're going to perpetuate by, you know, taking out labor's history out of the history books. Mm-hmm. And because right in the middle of the history of the United States told by Howard Zinn and the classic People's History of the United States is the classic railroad strike, which was used by other unions for a template. Not talking about the Pullman strike, which Zinn goes into real detail in A People's History of the United States. That strike that was bitterly fought against the same type of tycoons that are digging their heels in now. And if it wasn't for the left, the real left within the Democratic Party, which may be a couple of seats, one of them for sure, Bernie, there'd be no allowance, last-minute allowance made today that said, well, I guess we can go 7 days. We'll add on 7 days sick leave. Bernie alone is responsible for that adjustment and that being added to the proposal. There should be no interference by the Congress. A strike right now would be terrible. It would be bad. But it's worse to have a Congress that will prohibit any strike. That's much worse. And the fact that it would be crucial right now to the country and economically devastating is the very reason why it would work. Mm-hmm. That's like calling a strike by teachers a week before school starts. Yeah. Suddenly the parents' plans are in havoc. And right now, with the political environment in front of the upcoming elections, what do you think would happen if they went on strike? Do you think possibly they would win? Do we dare take that chance? No. What you have happening out of Biden's court is no different than when Reagan was elected and immediately went to the jugular of a very important air controller strike, if you remember.
Yep.
Now, every conservative, that's their wet dream. Is to bust up unions, is to stop unions. And what Biden's doing, well, I mean, we remember Hitler when the first week he's in office. make unions illegal.
Mm-hmm.
If you dare call yourself a progressive, Biden, this facet in the pie of progressivism, you can't miss it. You can't do what you think you're doing and continue to call yourself even a remote progressive, let alone a friend of labor. It's astounding.
Yeah, and I'll add to it, Jack. If you call yourself a progressive and you're not pro-union in every single instance, let me tell you something. You're not really a progressive. And yes,
No.
I'm aiming that comment to a local business owner that started to argue with me about a year ago. I don't talk to him anymore. This is a guy that supported the show in the past.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
We used to talk about real tests, right? Real litmus tests of what a progressive is. And we said at the top, question number one is, where do you stand on universal health care, right? That separates the boys from men right there, right away. And question number two, we can add what you just said dogmatically, and that is you can't call yourself progressive and not embrace unions. You can't.
Absolutely. Let me continue the story here. Parker claimed this action to call for imposing a rejected contract undermines Biden's relationship with labor, as he has repeatedly and proudly proclaimed to be the most pro-union president ever. I don't think so. Parker said, quote, what railroad workers are standing up for is a better quality of life to get the respect that they deserve and the benefits that they deserve and have earned. Sick time, reasonable time off to rest when the majority of the railroad workforce works on call 24/7, 365 days a year. End of quote. Parker added, quote, with the increased demands that the railroads have put on with their personnel cuts and with these draconian attendance policies, railroaders are not given sufficient time off to rest, to recoup, to recover from illness, or to spend time with their families. That's what they're looking for. The failure to address that could have a profound effect in the future on the ability for railroads to hire and maintain workers. End of quote. Jeff Kurtz, a locomotive engineer in Iowa for more than 40 years, severely criticized the Biden administration's tentative agreement. Kurtz, who's now retired, said, quote, it's not just about paid time off, it's about time off, period. Basically, what the carriers, and now it looks like what Congress is going to say too, is you're pretty well tied to your job for the rest of your life. End of quote. In the railroad agreement, workers were provided with one paid day off and the ability to schedule 3 doctor's appointments annually without being penalized. But Kurtz noted the parameters and restrictions make it nearly impossible to use the time off and provide employers with even greater interference and control over their workers' health care. Workers had sought 15 paid days off in the contract. Kurtz added, quote, the Presidential Emergency Board was just no help whatsoever. I thought it'd be somewhat more labor-friendly than it was, but it could have been written by the carriers as far as I was concerned. End of quote. This is a retiree saying this.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there was a vote on Wednesday. I have this from CBS News. I'm going to skip around this article quite a bit here. The House on Wednesday approved a bill that would impose a compromise labor agreement that was brokered by the Biden administration but rejected by 4 of 12 rail unions. The unions have threatened to strike if an agreement can't be reached before a December 9th deadline. President Biden had urged Congress to intervene. The House vote to impose the contract was 290 to 137. 79 Republicans joined 211 Democrats in voting to approve the measure. 8 Democrats and 129 Republicans voted against that legislation. Now, isn't that something? You have more Republicans than Democrats voting against forcing this contract down these railroad workers' throats.
Yeah.
What in the hell is that? Have we become Bizarro World?
Yeah, in more ways than one.
Yeah. In a separate vote, 221 to 207, the House also approved a separate resolution to provide 7 days of paid sick leave in the contract instead of 1 day, which is rail workers' main disagreement with the current agreement. Both measures now head to the Senate. On that vote, it was all 218 Democrats plus 3 Republicans voting yes. Every single Republican voted against it. They want to work you to the bone. They want to make you slaves, folks. Wake up.
And Darren, you know what's really timely about this? As we sit in the shadow of worldwide clashes, as we look at the Chinese people who are protesting against the control of that government that would never allow a strike, that would make it illegal to have a strike. When we look at the brave people there risking their lives, risking their jobs to stand against authoritarianism in China, and we look at Iran right now, where they're fighting for their lives, fighting for their freedom against a repressive government. And we realize that those organized groups of people, it's no different than a strike, no different whatsoever. So when you have a progressive here that says there's a chance for the powerless to fight against the powerful, a chance to push against power in the form of a strike, you should rally stand. You should be behind that with energy. But no, when you take the strike outside of a union, you're pulling the teeth of the wolf. You might as well say, I really, truly love baseball. I support baseball, but bats are illegal. You can no longer make bats in America, and you can't use bats. You can no longer have, you can have baseball, you can have unions, you can have teachers' unions, have them all day long, but you can't strike. And for Biden to stand up and say, let's take away their right to strike, that is weakening the whole ability of people gathering together, showing strength, and fighting against power. That's what the strike was designed to do. There's never been an instrument more effective, never been in American history, than a strike. And we can see what Biden really thinks of it by his actions right now at this moment.
Absolutely. And let me add, it weakens the First Amendment. Bottom line, period, end of story. Congress shall make no law. Those words, Congress shall make no law.
Pretty clear, isn't it?
Yep. But yet they still do. Oh, you can't strike if you're a teacher. You can't strike if you're a railroad worker. You know, the postal unions can't strike. You know, this harkens back to 1970, the last time the postal workers struck. You know, they tried bringing in the National Guard and they couldn't get the job done. The government finally had to say, look, we need you to come back. We will give you everything you want and then some, but you will sign a contract that says you can't strike anymore in the future.
That's what they fear.
Yep.
That's what they hate.
And by the way, Jack, you had mentioned Patco earlier. That kind of backfired on Reagan because 6 years later, after he had disbanded Patco, the air traffic controllers formed NATCA, the National Air Traffic Controllers Association, and they're affiliated with the AFL-CIO now. They weren't before under Patco. They have more rights now than they did before. So there you go.
Yeah, I was raised with strikes. My mother stood out in the cold with barrels of lumber burning to stay warm for Clark equipment that's no longer in existence. And I learned at a young age that the unfairness and injustice that the company was showing them in the form of all things health coverage, those people had a way to fight back. And if you take that ability away, we don't have any means. Look at these poor people that can't even protest, can't even gather, speaking about the amendment, can't even gather to protest in Iran and in China. And you're just promoting that, Biden, by trying to get them to lose the right to strike. I'm disgusted.
Yeah.
You know, and by the way, we don't have to say, we don't have to hold back on anything that's praising Biden in a negative light. We can say he's better than Trump and we'd vote for him again if the two faced off. Yeah. And I can say there's some things in a union that need to be improved upon. But the concept, the principle of a union, I stand for 100%. And we're looking at a president who still has his, how to say this, his natural proclivity towards the corporate world. And we've coined them as limousine liberals, you and I, many times.
Absolutely. They're owned. They're owned by the rich. Like Carlin said, it's a big club and you ain't in it.
That's right.
And here's what Bernie Sanders published on Facebook. Listen to this. Guaranteeing 7 paid sick days to rail workers would cost the rail industry a grand total of $321 million a year. You know how much of their profit that is?
That's a peanut.
Under 2%.
Yeah.
Please don't tell me the rail industry can't afford it. Railroad companies spent $25.5 billion on stock buybacks and dividends this year alone. Isn't that something?
Yeah, that's the oil companies' technique. You know, everybody's complaining, thinking that corporations need to make money, so it falls out their windows into our pockets. No,
Mm-hmm.
Only those that get favor from the corporations will espouse neoliberalism or trickle-down economics, which is exactly what Republicans have been doing for decades. They talk about, let's let the companies be free. Don't regulate them. Give them what they want. Give the farmers even money back. Give the large corporate world all they want, because we'll all prosper if we do that.
Yeah.
There's never been a bigger lie that still is working in these idiots' minds.
Mm-hmm. You know, like you, Jack, I grew up in a union household. My dad was a union carpenter for 42 and a half years. I remember as a little kid going out on the picket line with him one time.
Me too.
Yeah.
Yep.
You know, strikes are important. They're the most important tool the union has, bar none.
Yeah.
You know?
My mother was essentially a single parent. There wasn't a lot of money. And the Christmas party every year that the union threw for the families had a nice new winter coat waiting for you when you went. There were presents exchanged. There was a unification of people that helped each other, and they protested the greed of the company, and they fought against it. It was a beautiful thing. It truly was. And even as a youngster, like you're talking about, you could see it, you could feel it, you could feel the camaraderie. You know, this union strong and the fellowship and what was the Lech Walesa, what was his motto back when they were fighting? Just a little more history here today.
Yeah, I can't remember that. My mind's getting mushy.
Yeah. Well, you know, that unified people that cared about one another. The antithesis of a corporate philosophy, which is you're on your own, buddy. You figure it out. You either do it or you fail.
Are you talking about solidarity?
Yeah, there you go. Thank you.
Yep. Like I always put on, whenever I support a union, I always put the hashtag solidarity forever.
Solidarity forever. Yep.
Yep. You know, it's just, I don't know. I really don't know. And let me just add one point, because actually 2 points. First thing, I put a poster that I saw on Facebook. I put that on my personal page. Somebody took a photograph of Biden and put the word scab underneath and made it look like a poster. Well, can't argue with that.
The scab fits.
Yep.
Wear it.
Yep. One of these days I'll have to read the story about the scab on air. I haven't done that in years. The other one that I want to mention real quick before we move on is a friend of mine on Facebook posted a meme, just kind of switching topics a little bit, making comparisons of Andrew Carnegie with Elon Musk. You know, Carnegie started Carnegie Mellon. He did this, he did this, he did this, while Elon Musk spent $44 billion to let Nazis back on Twitter. Well, yeah. I had to give a little bit of an education about Carnegie, because Carnegie has a very tarnished reputation.
Yeah,
if you actually study labor history, it's called it's called the Big Carnegie Strike of 1892, when Carnegie's right-hand man had 300 Pinkerton quote-unquote detectives start firing guns at striking workers, their families as well.
Yep.
Women and children shot by Pinkertons. The Union got the upper hand on those bastards once they finally accepted their surrender. And then once they floated across to surrender, the Unions beat the crap out of them.
Yeah.
Deservedly so. So what did Carnegie's right-hand man do instead? Went to the governor of Pennsylvania and said, you need to bring the National Guard in. So he did. 8,500 troops to quash a strike.
Yeah. The police and the National Guard are always used against the people. Now, here's the thing. You mentioned labor history. What does that mean? People don't even know. They don't even know what it means. And these anti-CRT people are going to make damn sure that it's going to be taken out of history books. Take the Civil War out, take slavery out, take labor history. Because if they knew the history, like you did just mention, Pinkerton was hired in that Pullman strike, the rail strike, a famous strike. Pinkerton's group of thugs were hired in the miners' strike out in Wyoming, where they had the Ludlow massacre. There's a movie made, a famous movie made about the strike down in Tennessee, or wherever it was, the coal miners' strike. And the companies would call in these thugs, the Pinkerton and so forth.
Yeah.
History of a people's struggle. They're going to shut that off right with the civil rights and justice. But one thing I got to ask you, you were raised in a union home. Do you realize now that you're older that the philosophy of caring permeated from your father, because you can't turn your head. You're joining your fellow union worker. He's got to pay bills to his family. You know what I mean? Yeah. He's got shoes to put on the feet of his kids, just like you do. And that solidarity, that communal feeling, you can't get out of it. I could see it looking back at my mother's life and the way she interacted with her fellow workers. You know what I mean? I didn't see that at the time, but as I grow older, it's a whole philosophy that's the core of democracy. And well, our union membership is down lower than it's ever been, and look at our standard of living, Darren.
Yep. It's not a coincidence. There's a direct correlation. When union membership drops, so do the rights of workers, and so does the money.
The benefits and the money. Yep.
Absolutely. So let's go ahead to our next story here. We want to talk about, guess who came to dinner at Donald Trump's house in Mar-a-Lago, Florida? A white supremacist. Oh, good Lord.
Sure is. Wow.
I got this story. This is Mark Caputo writing for NBC News. This is dated November 29th. Just 2 days before Thanksgiving, Donald Trump was planning to have a private, uneventful dinner with an old friend. Ye, the rapper formerly known as Kanye West. We ought to just call him Cuckoo, because that's about what he is. The two had arranged to break bread Tuesday night at Mar-a-Lago in Florida after weeks of private phone conversations, as Ye lost lucrative partnerships and became a mainstream cultural pariah for his anti-Semitic remarks, according to those familiar with the talks between the two men. But Trump may have been walking into a trap in Mar-a-Lago's gilded halls, one that leveraged his own penchant for spectacle and showmanship against him. Ye arrived with three guests, including white nationalist and anti-Semite Nick Fuentes. Trump has since said he didn't know Fuentes or his background when they dined together. Yeah.
Total horse crap. He didn't know David Duke either.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't know Nick Fuentes, really.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Do you think he has guards. He has a special security. Do you think they may have told him who was coming to dinner? Do you think there'd be any communication? It's absurd.
Well, there's actually a little bit to that in this article. We'll get to that in a minute here.
Okay.
Fuentes confirmed the claim in an interview, but others at the crowded members-only club figured out his identity. News of the meeting prompted an avalanche of criticism from some Republican rivals and allies of Trump and his then week-old presidential campaign. In damage control, Trump's campaign is now instituting new vetting procedures and gatekeeping efforts as details emerge about how Fuentes and Trump found themselves at the same table, according to two people briefed on the plans. The uproar underscores long-standing issues with Trump as Republicans consider whether they want him back as president again in 2024. Both his campaigns and his administration were often characterized by chaos and buffeted by the consequences of his impulses as they stumbled from crisis to crisis.
That's true.
And Trump has repeatedly put himself in the center of controversies over racism, from falsely accusing the first black president of not being a natural-born citizen to announcing his 2016 presidential bid by portraying most Mexican migrants as rapists and drug runners.
Yep.
The headline grabbing attention on his guest and therefore the subsequent fallout were all been ensured by Trump before the dinner when he made a grand entrance at about 8 p.m. on November 22nd to meet his guests. Fuentes told NBC News, quote, "We saw everybody in the dining room get up and start applauding, and then the president entered." And well, we don't call him the president on this show. We just call him Trump. "He greeted us and he invited Ye into dinner, and Ye said that he wanted to bring us with him to the table. So he walked in and Ye took some pictures with some of the guests in the dining room, and then we sat down at the table." End of quote. Trump made sure they sat at a specially reserved table on the patio for all to see, according to Fuentes. But the dinner wasn't the happy photo op that Trump had planned. Ye criticized Trump for not doing enough to help pay the legal bills for those arrested in the January 6th Capitol riots. And he also told Trump that he might run for president against him and said Trump should instead be his running mate, all of which angered Trump, who attacked Ye's ex-wife Kim Kardashian, according to two dinner participants, and Ye, who blasted out a Mar-a-Lago debrief video to his 32.2 million Twitter followers the next day. In the video, Ye said, quote, "Trump is really impressed with Nick Fuentes," end of quote. Well, yeah, they're two peas in a pod.
Oh, they sure are. They'd had Herschel there, they'd had a full foursome. Could have golfed together.
No kidding. Fuentes said that, yeah, but who would be honest about the scorecard? Who'd lie who'd lie on their handicap?
Oh, gee whiz.
Oh, my God. Fuentes said that he praised Trump as, quote, "my hero," end of quote, and criticized Florida Governor Ron's death sentence for his potential GOP primary challenge to Trump. But he also told him to his face at the dinner that the one-time 2016 insurgent was in danger of becoming a scripted establishment bore who could lose in 2024. The bore of 2024.
Yeah, that's good. It's like all
God.
these religious nuts that think Trump is the second coming of Jesus.
Yeah.
I saw there somebody had scratched out, they had praised the Lord, and they had Trump in place and said, "Praise the Lord."
Oh, that's great. I need to get that. Oh, my God.
That's too funny.
Some Republicans, including former Vice President Mike Pence, have condemned the dinner, with Pence calling on Trump to apologize. One longtime Trump advisor who didn't want to go on the record criticizing his preferred candidate said it was clear that Fuentes' presence was part of a headline-grabbing setup. The advisor said, quote, "The master troll got trolled. Kanye punked Trump," end of quote.
That's beautiful.
As advisors to Trump have attempted to quell the backlash, some have insisted that Trump was essentially tricked by the rapper and his guests, a suspicion backed up by Milo Yiannopoulos, the anti-Trump far-right provocateur who is now acting as a political advisor to Ye. Yiannopoulos, the former Breitbart editor who was banned from Twitter in 2016 for inciting a racist campaign against comedian Leslie Jones, told NBC News that he was the architect of the plan to have Fuentes travel with Ye in the hopes of slipping him into the dinner with Trump. The intent, according to Yiannopoulos, was for Fuentes to give Trump an unvarnished view of how a portion of his base views his candidacy. Oh, geez.
Wow. That's some sophisticated crap.
Yeah. I believe your girl Marjorie Taylor Greene has criticized Yiannopoulos for this as well. Yeah. It's a whole bag of mixed fruits and nuts, Jack.
Yeah, they're all turning each other. There was quite a pushback from the Republican sector. Really, the strongest was from Pence, who said, this would be an apology. McConnell was really strong, but you're not seeing the heavy hitters. You're not seeing the Speaker of the House and these people. But slowly, I think there's an erosion. I really do. and things like this help. This weekend helped with, and I think it's going to help the race in Georgia. That is a record turnout, by the way, voting. I think that whole weekend fiasco is going to help Warnock.
I hope so. God, I hope so.
Yeah.
Yiannopoulos persuaded Karen Giorno, a former Trump 2016 campaign advisor from Florida, to give Ye a ride to Mar-a-Lago, which she said led her to become an accidental member of Ye's dinner party. Yiannopoulos said he also wanted Giorno to brief Ye on Trump and politics, and if she went to the dinner, to lend a sense of political gravitas to the discussion. The fourth member of the party was a man Ye later identified as a parent of a student at his private school in California, Donda Academy, which, by the way, is shut down for the year after Ye's anti-Semitic remarks. Yiannopoulos said he was unsure of why the man traveled with them. Yiannopoulos said Fuentes is serving in an advisory capacity to Ye. Giorno is not an official member of the unofficial Ye campaign team, but flew to Los Angeles to meet with them this week. Yiannopoulos told NBC News, quote, "I wanted to show Trump the kind of talent that he's missing out on by allowing his terrible handlers to dictate who he can and can't hang out with." End of quote. He added, quote, "I also wanted to send a message to Trump that he has systematically, repeatedly neglected, ignored, abused the people who love him the most, the people who put him in office, and that kind of behavior comes back to bite you in the end." End of quote.
Yeah. Yeah, the scum at the bottom of the pond. That's what he's talking about.
Yep. Yiannopoulos said that he arranged the dinner, quote, "just to make Trump's life miserable," end of quote, because news of the dinner would leak and Trump would mishandle it. Fuentes echoed the sentiment by saying, quote, "I hate to say it, but the chickens are coming home to roost. This is the frustration with his base and with his true loyalists," end of quote. I got to read this to you, Jack. You'll love this.
Go ahead.
Trump fumed afterwards that Ye had betrayed him by ambushing him. According to one confidant who relayed the conversation to NBC News on the condition of anonymity, Trump said, quote, "He tried to f*** me. He's crazy. He can't beat me." End of quote.
Oh, wow. That's clown.
Of Fuentes' presence, the source said, quote, "Trump was totally blindsided. It was a setup." End of quote. Some in Trump's...
What are your feelings?
Go ahead.
Do you agree with that? You think it was a setup?
It wouldn't surprise me.
No, the more that I hear this, the more I think it's correct.
But God, Trump is just... Yeah. Trump and Ye, for that matter, Kanye. Ugh, what a joke. Unbelievable. Let me read this one to you here. Some in Trump's orbit had cautioned him not to have dinner with Ye under fire for anti-Semitism in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. I was just going to say why he would even open the door to him.
That's according to two sources who have been briefed on an internal damage assessment the campaign performed after the controversy erupted. But Trump is known for refusing to heed cautious counsel, guardrails, and gatekeepers. So he went ahead with the dinner alone, telling confidants that he thought Ye needed his counsel. Trump is so, what's the word I'm looking for? Trump believes his BS so much that he thinks that Kanye West needs his advice.
Yeah.
What a narcissist. Unbelievable. One confidant.
What is he doing with his life? What are you going to advise him on? As you pass him, the cheeseburger, the McDonald's cheeseburger. What are you really going to tell him?
Yeah, no kidding. One confidant told NBC News that Trump acknowledged he wanted the rapper to be seen because, quote, "it would be fun for the members of Mar-a-Lago," end of quote. Oh, God, I got to stop there. This is just way too much. So, yeah, looks like maybe Kanye West has decided to
what a scene,
screw
though.
Trump
you know what
over.
I mean?
That'd be great.
What a scene. A burnout anti-Semitic rapper sitting on a table of McDonald's wrappings. Sitting there, the three of them. You've got a really the racist. If you study that guy's life, Fuentes, he may be the most caustic. I mean, And so the current atmosphere around Conway, it couldn't be any more negative. And he brings in this anti-Semitic guy. That's more than just ignoring your advisors. That's incredibly stupid. I'm just encouraged because I think he's going to self-destruct before he gets even into the primaries at this rate.
That would be nice.
The Republican primaries I'm talking about.
Yeah. I got a joke for you, Jack. An anti-Semite, a racist, and Donald Trump walk into a bar. They're all one person.
Did I hear a drum roll? That's perfect, huh?
That was.
That's good. Good.
Oh, God. Let's get back to some serious stuff here. I'm done talking about Trump. I can't do it anymore. Let's get to our final story for this week. We've been talking in the last couple of weeks about the Club Q shooting, or at least the last week or so.
Right.
Our friend Jeff Smith over at GRID, Grand Rapids Institute for Information Democracy, GRIID.org, wrote an article dated November 27th where he talked about, I hadn't heard about this. Apparently somebody sprayed graffiti on the headquarters of the,
Focus
on the Family, James Dobson.
Yep.
Speaking of racist and assholes in general, Jim Dobson. Yep. Oh, my God, I can't stand him. My former middle brother listens to his tapes incessantly in his car. It's disgusting.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. So apparently somebody or a group of people took to their headquarters and spray painted the words, "Their blood is on your hands, 5 lives taken."
Mm-hmm.
A photo of the image was published on the website It's Going Down, which we've used as a source a couple of times on this show. The group that is claiming responsibility for the message posted this statement along with the photo. It says, "It is important to us that you understand why Focus on the Family must be held accountable for the ramifications of their hateful theology. You have likely seen the onslaught of anti-trans legislation, of which Focus on the Family is a huge proponent, both in funding and propaganda. With an alarmingly expansive network, they work closely with powerful entities such as the DeVos family to promote and fund this anti-trans legislation. Focus on the Family's goal is to eradicate queerness. Tactics they use to achieve this include indoctrination, media saturation, falsified research, and conversion therapy. We encourage you to continue to investigate the many examples of their culpability, which can be found front and center on their own website."
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to read part of Jeff's article here.
Doesn't Jeff call for a more organized, or let's put it this way, a centered group to combat the DeVos hatred, LGBTQ, and stronger than what we have here right now? And you think about it, there is not really a codified group.
Yes. We'll get to that in just a minute here. Jeff wrote that GRID has been monitoring the kind of support from the DeVos and Prince and Van Andel family, which is reflected in the statement. In 2016, when the shooting at the Pulse nightclub happened in Orlando, Florida, GRID wrote a response talking about the role that the DeVos family has played in creating an anti-LGBTQ culture, which normalizes violence against those in lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, and queer communities. In more recent posts, we have also made the connection to the funding of the DeVos family and how it fosters anti-LGBTQ violence, specifically in the Republican candidates they have endorsed. And Jeff has several links to that on his site. And here's something that Jeff did a little digging into. There are 800 churches in Grand Rapids. We are the church capital of the world. And that is not a
30
joke.
of them. Yeah.
And only 30 of them are open for members of the LGBTQ community.
There's the proof in the pudding. That's all you need to know.
And let me wrap this up by mentioning an article that Jeff published over at, he actually published it on his personal Facebook. This is Natasha Leonard writing for The Intercept. This is dated November 29th. Over the weekend, the Paper of Record's editorial board described a chilling preview of what the future might look like if violence from the right begets violence from the left. The event that precipitated those fears at the New York Times offices in Manhattan? A would-be showdown that never was at a Roanoke, Texas restaurant's family-friendly drag brunch. An armed far-right group, including the Proud Boys and self-identifying Christian fascists, turned up to harass brunch-goers, a sadly commonplace form of fascist intimidation that's hardly news. Instead, what concerned the Times about this event was that the armed fascists were met and obstructed by armed anti-fascists who had been asked by members of the local community to provide security for the brunch. In the end, no one was hurt in this alleged portent of political violence, and the restaurant owner's son, a performer at the drag brunch, thanked the anti-fascist of the Elm Fork John Brown Gun Club for keeping us safe. Yes, John Brown. We've talked about him on this show. You need to do your history, folks. This is the guy that cut the heads off of slave owners.
Yes, zero tolerance for racism. Zero tolerance.
Yes.
This is his motto. You don't justify it. You don't say it's biblical. You go in and you arrest the owners of the plantation and hang them in the big old tree out in front. That was his approach. Without that approach, we wouldn't have the Civil War.
Yeah. And I want to read this paragraph before we go. It is a profound mischaracterization of the history and principles of armed community defense to suggest that armed anti-fascist and anti-racist are engaged in escalatory political violence that is worthy of the same condemnation as the fascists they confront. I think that summed it up a lot better than I ever could.
Yeah, I would agree.
Profound mischaracterization. It's not the same, folks. I'll put it more bluntly. They're not the same. It's not an equivalency. There is no equivalency because
false equivalency.
False equivalency. The folks on the right are the ones that want to kill gay people simply for being gay.
Yeah, it's biblical.
Yeah,
it's a verse. I'm telling you, we're saturated with the hatred that's biblical. That's a foundation for these nuts.
Yeah.
No wonder they went to Dobson's sign. They should do it here. They should do it to the Christian Reformed Church. I'm serious. That's the headwaters.
Yep, it absolutely is. And like Carlin said, religion is one of the biggest causes of death.
Hell yes. There's no hatred like Christian love.
You know, that's a perfect way to end this show, Chad. It really is. Folks, we are out of time for this week. We'll be back next week. I'm Darren Gibson.
I'm Jack Prince.
Please support independent media, the First Amendment, and a woman's right to choose.
The stations that carry Southpaws do not necessarily share the opinions expressed on the show. Southpaws is protected by the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution and is copyrighted by Big D Entertainment. All rights reserved.